Ayin Beis, Volume 1, we're up to chapter 61, which is the 16th Discourse, the bottom of page, Kufya Gimel 113. We've already analyzed and reviewed chapter 60 several different ways, several different times. I just want to sum it up before we move on. The key thing the Rebbe Rashab is entering into now is, of course, the impact of Makif on our world. Because if you stopped the discussion a few chapters back, you could say, okay, fine. Pnimi is what dominates, what defines existence, the paintbrush, the art. And we know there's an Makif out there. God wanted it. There's a desire and so on. But now he's going, no. That desire and that so-called hovering force, or however we define, encompassing makif, that is an equalizer. Even though it equalizes everything, it still has impact on the structure of existence. Not just that it put it in place and watches it from above, but it impacts us actively every second. So this began already, actually, it's really an elaboration of the Tanya, in Perek Memches, when he says Seviv, the Alter Rebbe writes, Seviv doesn't mean Seviv and Makif as if it's outside. It's in there. He says, it's within all of existence. It's only not manifest in any conscious way. Perhaps you can compare it somewhat psychologically to the unconscious. It's there, completely there. But you and I cannot be conscious of it. As soon as you're conscious of it, it's not it. Because then it's already entered your so-called your terms. But it's there. So it's you could call it quantum energy. Basically, it's a state of energy that cannot be controlled by us. You know, sometimes he doesn't use that word, so why would I use it?
Because later on he does use it.
So when he uses it, that's when we use it. I'm fine when the Rebbe introduces it. He doesn't want to introduce it yet, from obvious reasons, because maybe it's not. We're talking more generally. You know, we're talking here before the Tzimtzum. There's no Chachmas Tamah before the Tzimtzum. Chacham is already at level. He does introduce it later. Listen, if you hadn't learned it yet, you wouldn't have brought it up, right? So just because you were given a sneak preview, you know. My point is, if it helps your mathematical structure, fine with me. I'm just saying right now he hasn't said it yet. So anyway, but here's the key thing here. So in Tanya it says, so it's unconscious quantum energy. You know, it's something like, you know, to use a good example, I use this a lot in counseling couples. You talk about love. The truth is not just love. Any real experience, when I say real, I mean not artificial, not superficial, does not pass the muster of two key things that this modern world wants. Everybody wants to acquire things, right? And they want it immediately. The two main things of reality. Anything that's real, you'll see does not fit those two things. Everything that's real requires a process, and you can't acquire it. It emerges. I'll take an example. Take a child. Can you force a child out of its mother's womb before 9 months? I'm talking about if, God forbid, you have no choice. There's a process. You plant a seed in the ground. It's not growing into a tree overnight. I don't care what you do. There's a process. And it emerges. You can't go and say, I'm going to go buy it. I know we live in a society today where you can get tomatoes all year round. So we're not even in line with the natural rhythm of nature. You lived on a farm, you knew this season this grows, this season that grows. We live in a world that's become so artificial that we think that everything is everything, everywhere, all the time. It's not that way. So we've developed this type of attitude that we can acquire something, you can buy it, and it's also programmed. You know, this is the marketing society we're in, is if you have enough money, you can buy anything. But it's not a cliche to say love, truth, God, spirit, all these things cannot be bought, and they can't be, and they don't, and they're a process. They don't come quickly. They come through emerging. You can't say, oh, here's the button you press. You get rid of the obstacles and it emerges. Why am I saying it? Because I think it's a big difference between transcendent and immanent energy. Mamala kalam, immanent energy is in there. So it's a matter of tapping the energy and releasing it. In transcendent energy, as soon as you try to own it or control it, it's no longer yours. The only way you can access it is through bittul. It's like what the Chassidus brings, the Rebbe brings, that there's there's the mitzvah of shikha. There's only one mitzvah that you can have by not concentrating, by forgetting. Like when you're picking the field, whatever you forget to gather, you're supposed to leave. So it's a mitzvah that comes through, it's unconscious mitzvah basically. It's a result of your forgetting, not of your doing. Not zachar, remembering. It's not giving charity, it's what you have forgotten. So the Alter Rebbe brings in the Likkutei Torah, when he speaks Shikha, and the Rebbe brings it, Kol habareich min hakavod, the one who runs away from honor is the one that honor pursues you. The one who pursues honor, honor eludes you. And the Rebbe would always say, often would say, when he would repeat this, he would say, doesn't mean when you run away from honor that you look over your shoulder whether it's pursuing you. Obviously, that's not the point. In other words, there's things like honor, kavod, like it says we find in Pirkei Avos, you say shlosh ksarim heim, right? There's three crowns: the crown of Torah, crown of malchus, the crown of kahuna, crown of kingship, and the crown of a priesthood. Then it says the keser shem tov eila al gabeim. The crown of good name rises above them all. It's related here to Keser. So the question is asked, that's 4 ksarim. So why does it say 3? And then you add this 4th? Because the 4th one you cannot acquire. The first 3 you can learn Torah. A kohen that comes through birth. Malchus, Discourse of Malchus, Shevet Yehuda, whatever, King, House of David. Shem Tov, you can't go ahead and go buy a good name. You can't acquire it. There's nothing you can do. It's when you do everything else, suddenly it emerges. So the Eil al Gabein, that's the interpretation, that the 4th crown rises above them, meaning not just it's higher than them. It emerges when you have the other 3, and you behave properly, so Kasher Shem Tov. In other words, Malchus and many other things emerge as opposed to it. The point I'm making here is that transcendent energy, as soon as you bottle it, and you try to package it, you lose it. That's why Hashem said to Moshe, you cannot see me and live. Yeah, if you look with your eyes, you can't see me and live. If you stop looking, you'll be able to see me. So, in other words, there's inherently in existence, there's always this element of transcendent energy. So he's talking now about, and Rabbi Elazar just shared with us this mind-blowing revelation he had, that this explains the vastness of the universe. So much of it that seems like inefficient. If you were an architect, an artist, your painting is perfect. You don't have anything extra. You don't have extra space. And here you have this vast amount of space that we will never see, we will never experience. All we know is out there. We have no idea how far it even goes. How far do the universes go? But that alone is because God planted into existence a part of Sevav Kalaman. If it was Mamala Kalaman, then it's sufficient. There's not Leipachas V'Leyesa. There's nothing more, nothing less. I mean, I'm trying to convey. Is that an accurate way? Anyway, so now he's speaking about the effect of transcendence. I said based on Tanya, because the Tanya in Perek Memches, chapter 48, says, Seviv does not mean, he quotes it earlier in chapter, just to give you the exact, he begins, you see sometimes you need to be a little detective when you're learning Ayin Beis. You got to go back, because there's telltale signs of things he's going to say, and you start seeing, hey, in the last 10 chapters, he mentioned that same Tanya 6 times. That's not an accident. That means that it's an ongoing thread. So there's a lot of Ayin Beises like that. You go back, you suddenly realize, that's what he meant, and so on. So just part of the methodology here. So here in the chapter where he begins, chapter 49, on the bottom of the page, just the way he starts quoting chapter 48 of Tanya. He says, so when it says Makif, bottom, it says, the Seviv ain't Pirshu Seviv Makif Momaila. Seviv doesn't mean that it's surrounds and encompasses from above. This is words of Tanya. That in truth, Seviv is within every part of existence, and listen to the words. That's words you use from Amale. Techiyuse and Primiyuse. You see bottom of 86. Tech and Primis means within and internal. Then he goes, the distinction is, it's not misamsim, it's not concentrated, it's not contracted and diminished to be commensurate. It's not tailored to the creature. So it's not tailored to our containers, but it's there. That is, if I want to find a better definition of unconscious than that, better definition of quantum. It's there, completely there, but it's not tailored to our terms. That it should be tfisa, that it should be graspable, containable, or hislapshus, enclosed literally. And that's the expression. That's the language from Tanya. The rest is from here. So in other words, so he's there completely. That's what we say. Hu mekayim shel he is the space of existence, but existence is not his space. There's a key element that's an ongoing thread since he started talking about Ratzon. So Ratzon impacts everything, but everything doesn't impact it in return. It's like you're there, but there's no reciprocal relationship. That's the key. Mamalkam, there's a reciprocal relationship. If you wanted to apply it as a model to friendship or to romance or to love or to marriage or whatever, you'd say two people have to have a mamala relationship. They have to have a connection with a certain, they understand each other, and then there's the mystique. There's a mystique that you have to so-called surrender to or accept or embrace. The mystique. Like Ava and Yira. Love of God is a closeness, I relate, and Yira is that awe that comes from something that's beyond. Obviously the goal. So taking this theme further, so in chapter 58, he began explaining how this transcendence impacts everything. In chapter 59, he began to explain how this transcendence on different levels, because it's even deeper. The transcendence informs, the shayech ala pnimi, that's the key word. It's shayech ala pnimi, meaning, and then he goes even deeper in chapter 59, where he says that the pnimi comes from the makif. Remember, where it arose in God's infinite desire and will, the shir atzmei b'koyach, the 10 spheres, the art. And then in chapter 60, as I said, I'll just give you some sources, because I'm going to mark it down. Basically, chapter 60 begins the discussion, what is the impact. Remember, there's two makifim right now. The operative makifim we're working with, there's more makifim. Remember, every world has a makif. There's Kesser of Asiya, Kesser of Yitzira, Kesser of Bria, Kesser of Atzilus. Literally what it means, the desire for Asiya, desire. So each world has its specific transcendent force. But then there's the general transcendent, and there's two general transcendent forces that are makif of everything. One is Tehiri law, what we call it the higher, what would be called the shining, and the Tehiri Tata, the lower shining. Tehiri law is Erein Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum. It's basically the 10. Atzilus the Klolos. It's the 10 spheres. It's where you already have in God's essence an image of existence. And Ak is the Tir Tata, is after the Tzimtzum. You also have a desire. Now you asked this day a question which I answered, and actually, thank God I had learned this before, but I didn't remember exactly where. He doesn't spell it out, but it's clear from chapter 60 that there's two ritzenas going on here. There's two levels of desire. One is the desire that's already manifest in existence, and it's still a hovering transcendent force. That's Ak. So now you already have a tzimtzum has taken place. You already have the structure, but it's in a very amorphous state. But you can call it a structure. It's Seder Shtalshlus now already. When you talk about the desire before the tzimtzum, we're only using words that we should be able to relate to. But for all practical purpose, nothing can exist from there. If there was no tzimtzum, I'm talking about not that God can do anything. No tzimtzum, if that would emerge, all you'd have is godliness, just in the Koyach HaGvul and Koyach HaBli are one thing. But on the other hand, once existence is there, you can trace it to that place. So that means I'm not going to go right now into the distinction, because if you want to know more about this, there's a Samach Vov Maimer called Odom Kiyiyah, which I would say is complements. I mean, remember this chapter was written a few years later, so I would refer to Odom Kiyiyah Samach Vov, where it complements this chapter very much. But if you go even beyond that, and here I was just looking at a Maimer in Tavshin Yud, which Maimer is it? Also, chapter. The Maimer is Besukas Teishvu Tavshin Yud. Chapter 26 also speaks about these two, the difference in Tir Elah and Tir Tata. Here it's shorter, more.
Chapter 26 and where?
Tavshin Yud, Friedrich Rebbe, last year. Besukas. Page, I'll take exactly, page 60. And the real basis of chapter 60 here, it's just chapter 60 page.
Stands for Soviet.
Okay. There you go.
It doesn't appear in the Seres Memoris.
Right.
And I asked,
So it's not in the Malach Kalam.
Stein's asked that question specifically. Why?
And?
But
Yeah.
you know that? He gave me an answer, but I got a better answer from Rabbi Ginsburg. The Malach, Likkutei Ginsburg, gave me a better answer. He said the first time Samach appears in Chumash is in the word Sobek. In the river that comes out of Aden, Pishtin, I think was it?
Yeah. Okay.
It stands for the letter Samach is sowed, but it's secret.
Yeah. The thing is, I just had a question. There's no Samach, you're right, but it says in the Gemara that the Mem and Samach of the Luchas were the only ones that were, it was a miracle.
Right.
Because they're...
He said,
So why is that? There's no Samach. Huh?
Because he said Shin and Samach. Rabbi Zatzal's answered that he said Shin and Samach. Shin and Samach are interchangeable. But it didn't fit with
Shin and Samach.
Yeah.
My name is also begins with a Samach. Simon. Okay, 1 second. So chapter 60 is primarily based on a mimer. I'm doing a lot of tracing to the original mimer of the Alter Rebbe. A mimer from the Alter Rebbe that he was said, Shabbos Parsha Kisisa, on a pasuk in Sodden Osav Timker, on what we say in Eishes Chayil. So Shabbos Parsha Kisisa, the year was Taf Kuf Samach Hey. That would be 5565. This mimer was said by the Alter Rebbe, written by the Mittler Rebbe, and written by the Tzemach Tzedek, and is printed in Biur Hazer. And chapter 60 is based on that discourse. And when you look there, I would love to be able to study it like that, like really in depth. You look there, this whole chapter takes on a whole different meaning. I was confused by a lot of details in this chapter. I looked there, it's a lot different. You see the picture. And more important, you see the kiddushim of the Meriv Rashab.
Sorry, could you repeat that source again?
Shabbos Kisisa, Tov Kuf Samach Hey. It's printed in the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe, Tov Kuf Samach Hey, and in Biur Hazer of the Tzemach Tzedek, page 256. I've been learning it, so I know the pages. And the Maimer Odom Ki I mentioned from Samach Vav, and a Maimer called V'Hoye Emunas Itecha, Tov Reish Nun Beis. Tov Reish Nun Beis would be 1892. Also Rebbe Rashab. So when you look at all those, it rounds out a lot what it says in this chapter here. Plus there's plenty of additions here. But basically the Kudah was, which we've discussed at length, is that that to understand Ak's impact on existence, you have to understand that Ak is, as I said, Shefer Mabit. We say this in the Davening Rosh Hashanah, that Sefer Mabit and sees the whole picture. Skira Achas. Sefer means to gaze and to have a glimpse of the whole picture. It's like the picture of art, the whole picture. And there he actually adds, he doesn't say here, from the beginning of time to the end of time, and he goes through the Avos, Matan Torah, all the years in Golus, Mashiach, everything is there in that image. Everything is that image. So then the question, of course, is asked, like it says in Pirkei Avos, Hakol Tzofoi, everything is seen. So what means Harashus Nasuna? So where's there the Bechira? He asked that question in that mimer. The Alter Rebbe asked that question. And that's where he explains that Makif, that's why it's so critical. See, he says this here, but when you look at there, you see how it's the picture, that's Makif's power. That's what it means when you say it's there and it's not there. It's not just a play of words that the unconscious is here, but we can't see it. The unconscious is here, but it doesn't impact us. Not only we can't grasp it, it also doesn't impact us in a conscious way. So it does not determine our conscious decisions. Now, I'm not going to say our unconscious is Ak, and in our unconscious all our lives play themselves out. That doesn't say anywhere. But the general Ak, let's put it this way, the divine unconscious, which exists in the conscious existence, definitely sees the whole picture, but does not impact it. And not because, now obviously it ultimately comes down, that Tzemach Tzedek says these lines, that's why it was so fascinating to me to find it, that just like God's mind creates, which is Kol Yochel, and our mind is not that way. You envision something, it doesn't do anything, no impact. Same thing, Kol Yochel, the other way around, that he could envision it and withhold impacting it. So it's definitely a power of kol yachol, but it definitely allows for true free will. Discusses at length the Tzemach Tzedek, which is the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, basically. He sums it up here. What I was bothered by was when it says, when he started saying the Tanya says that God knowing us gives us life. And then suddenly he says, but then there's a Ratzon Yediyah that's even before that. Before the one that is there to create the worlds. And he says, and that one does not cause the creation. So I asked the question yesterday, my question was, why do you need to go there? You could say the knowledge, the force that creates existence, right, has the power to create, but he has also the power not to impact us. But number one is in those discourses, as I said, Adam Kiyya especially, and a few other places, there's clearly two desires. It's almost mashma, I would even say that the higher desire is not ak, is Tehiri Allah. The desire before creation of the worlds is Tehiri Allah, it's not Adam Kadmon. And that reason, I explained it yesterday, and I'll say it again, the reason it's not sufficient to say that the force that creates also withholds, because as soon as it creates, it has a relationship. To say then, Kol Yachol, in that would be like, it's impossible for us to. It means God is creating, the force is creating us, but it doesn't force your hand. That would be impossible to understand. To say that God has us in His mind and is unconscious and doesn't force our hand, okay, that's it. That's what makif is. But to say that God's desire creates, is the force of life, and at the same time doesn't impact our bechira, that would be a problem. Now I'm explaining it. The question is whether it really means that here or not, because
you can solve that problem without resorting to this security. If you think that we're a chelik elokam al mamish, and the part of us that has bechira is a godlike property and exists in the same place as hashkafa pratis, that I've explained this.
Yeah. You mentioned this. I'll tell you the reason I'm not going there is because he's trying to explain this and say there's talshus, not using atzmus. Well, you're saying yes. You could use bechira as being what he says ultimately that we have that type of divine detachment, so to speak. That's what bechira is. That God is like not nitfus. Bechira doesn't mean like free will in the sense you choose. It means he's not bound by anything that causes him to choose. So we also have that. But he doesn't want to use atzmustic reason. He wants to use it in existence. In other words, he's talking here about God's knowledge. Because remember, we're talking about a relationship. We're talking about makif now. What you described is that we have bechira from atzmus. That would be, because atzmus can be and not be at the same time. But here we're talking about a makif that does impact existence. And at the same time, it's not impacting our free will. Huh? No, but you have to understand. You have to understand. 1 second.
This type of reasoning, it's almost always, it's a very linear type of reasoning, and that's why we keep circling back and forth.
It's not linear at all. It's critical because without this, you have no way back to God. You can't go jump to atzmus. That's the bottom line. You jump to atzmus, you do not have a relationship. Of course, atzmus. Then you don't need this whole stage of thought. You can say atzmus gave us a bechira, and that's it. We're talking about how we need to have this relationship with all the levels of ishtalshalos, or else we don't have an integration going on. And he is absolutely using this. He's not using atzmus power. He's using here, he's using kol yachol, but within existence, that something can be there. In other words, the unconscious mind of God. If you say that God doesn't need to have us in His unconscious, it's perfectly fine. Atzmus can do anything. But He wants to have a relationship with us. How do you have a relationship with us and not push our hand, force our hand? There's no way. You go to Atzmus, you destroy the whole structure. But he doesn't talk about it. Why is he not bringing anything that he doesn't even hinting? Why is he not hinting to anything you're saying? Because what you're saying is not that simple. You heard it, but this is the key thing that Chassidus says. The Alter Rebbe says this. The Rebbe can't be coming. Why is this so important? Because this is within the relationship. You have a relationship with God. If someone says, if I have a relationship with you, and your knowledge is affecting me, so where do I come into play? If you want to bring Atzmus into the picture, you want to know the truth is, you're going to have a big problem to explain where our real avodah is. Because you go back to Neir Alila, you always bring that up.
Right.
So then, and you know something? That's a big mistake what you're making. You're jumping to a whole discussion and missing a whole part of Chassidus. But you're basically saying there's no free will. That's really what you want to say.
Unless it's Rabbi.
There's no free will, and even our sins are somewhat planned. That's what you're alluding to.
The business we learned from Rabbi Miguel very strong.
You learned it, but you learned that. You don't learn this. By the way, the Ner Alila is brought in this mimer also. And there you see clearly it's not exactly as the way you think it is. It's not. You have, if you take out, if you bring Atzmus into the picture, you're basically taking out our real effort at the end of the day. And that's why Atzmus is not enough in this whole picture. God wouldn't need to create Seder Shtashos. Why didn't he just create a world, put a chelik elakama mal mamash with powers of Atzmus, and change the world? Why is that enough? What do we need all these levels for? Let me ask you a question. Do you ever think about that? I guarantee you don't have an answer, right? Because you really don't know why we need all these levels. Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Look, forget about theory now. Don't go live in your head. Let's talk today and tomorrow. Are we living our lives aligned to godliness or not? With all this knowledge. Why not? Because to integrate it takes it's a very meticulous and tedious process, step by step by step. We had, God remind you, we had a Holocaust. We had Churban Beis Hamikdash. We've had destructions. Because existence has to come to terms with God on its terms. It cannot just jump to Atzmus. It won't work. It's not what God wants. He wants Tachtenim. And as soon as you have Tachtenim, you need to have a Seder Shtalshus. If you have a Seder Shtalshus, you've got to climb the steps this way. What you're saying is like this. The Rebbe brings us about the reasons of creation. In Kabbalah, there are 3 reasons given. Okay? There's the reason God wants to reveal His potential. There's God wants us to know Him. There's even a reason that God wants to bestow good. There's different reasons. Then Chassidus brings, and the Rebbe brings it in Sichos, the ultimate reason is Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu, desire of God, Dir B'Tachtenim. So the big question is, why do we have all the other reasons for? That's the ultimate reason. And the Rebbe says the following. Because he desired to have Dir B'Tachtenim, that desire in turn created reasons on all levels of Ishtalshalos. That reason is the ultimate reason. But that created a reason. Why is Atzilus here? Atzilus is to reveal godliness. Understand? So those reasons essentially turned. Now, if God did not create a system of structure that is a logical structure, everything changes. But the 10 spheres, which are God's basically instruments, are logical structure. That logical structure compels us to say that Atzmus wants the structure just as much as he wants Tachtenim. Understand what the word here is? It's not just he wants the yesh. He wants the whole structure, else he wouldn't put it there. Why? Because he doesn't just want Tachtenim, he doesn't just want the lows, he wants that lows, the world, have a relationship with him. And there's no way to have a relationship in this type of existence without communication, without step-by-step process. Why are we born babies? Why aren't we just born? If the purpose of we learned first Rashi, Breishis bara b'shvil haTorah b'shvil Yisrael. Why do we have babies? They can't even learn Torah yet. We should be born bar mitzvah, 20 years old, like other Machav and Gan Eden, because it's part of the process that we need to grow through it. We need to earn it. We need to make our mistakes. We need to be able to fall. Why did God have to have that? I know we understand the beauty of babyhood. I wish everybody was. I think we should all. If we all remain babies, we'd be in better shape. You know what I mean? Pure. But I mean, why do you need the process? Same question you could ask. Why didn't God give... Another question. So why didn't God give the Torah to Adam Achav and Gan Eden? He told them, love the L'shamra, serve me, protect. He gave them a mitzvah, pruravu. Give them the Torah. Matan Torah should have been day one. The whole world was created for Torah. It took 26 generations. The same reason is given, because the universe, time-wise, is like a child in the microcosm. We have to earn it. The Ovis, Bar Mitzvah was Matan Torah. You need the chinuch. Because God teaches us the entire Torah in our mother's womb, but then you have to be made to forget. And on a conscious level now you need to get there. Unconsciously we retain the Torah, but consciously. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this very important because I myself had these dilemmas. When I started learning Chassidus, so first I learned the structure, very powerful stuff. Then I was exposed to the world of Atzmus, And the Rebbe speaks Atzmus and Rabbi are Mashpia, Atzmus. became so overwhelming, I started saying to myself, what do we need? What do we need all these details for? Atzmus is great. Let's just go to Atzmus. And it took me years. I used to even ask myself a better question. What do we need all the psukim for? Just tell us, go straight to Eirei and Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum. Why do you need a pasuk to go and ask questions on Parsha Kisaveh and ask questions and so on and so forth? Jump straight into Atzmus and talk about Likkutei. And then I realized, because it's a world of details. God's in the details. We don't live in the world of Atzmus. That's very nice. There's no way the structure, however, will be contained by it. It's like seeing the light and forgetting that you gotta, 1 second. Can you bring it back into your day-to-day mundane reality? And I remember I went to Rabbi and I said, you exposed us to the world of Atzmus, and you forgot to tell us that you have to bring it back to Shtalshlus. And the Rebbe, when he speaks about it, because the Rebbe is coming as the 7th Rebbe, after everything Chassidus says, the Rebbe is taking it to the next level, to the ultimate level, Der Ashvi, whatever, Atzmus in this world. But the Rebbe is not negating the process that brought us here. So I'm saying it's a critical thing. It's a critical thing. You have the etzem, and the etzem has to be begili. And begili requires a painstaking process. This would be the mistake of, let's say, a parent who says, I'll just teach my child Atzmus, and forgets that the child needs to be spoon-fed step by step by step. You can't just jump to the kavana. So, like I tell a lot of people, Chabad, one thing for sure, you go to any child, they know why God created the existence. They may not know how to learn. They may not know how to read but they know why God created existence. You go to other people, they may know the whole Torah, but they have no idea why we're here. It's like interesting. We have the etzem sometimes, but the etzem has to come into the details. You have to be able to, to learn a piece of Gemara and see Likkutei there. You can't just, and trust me, when you start learning Chassidus, you start, you're somewhat like almost bored by the details, in a way. But the truth is, that's exactly the point. The point is it has to come to the details. That's why I know exactly what you're talking about. But it has to go through these steps, or else you can't just come to a jump and just say, Atzmus knows it all, even the sins are part of the plan. Forget about all the problems with that saying, and then basically just, God forbid, what that can conclude, people can come to. It's not that simple. There's a process, and it has to go through the process. The bottom line, you can't get to Atzmus without going through Atzmus's structure that he created. He wants you to go through the art. You can't just jump to the artist. Anyway.
But don't we say, ultimately, reconcile the two perspectives here? Don't we say even in Tanya that there are two ways? There's a short way and a long way? There's a short way and a long way.
But the short way and long way in Tanya. Yeah. But first of all...
So what I just want to say, I have a quick little point.
Go ahead.
Because I'm very excited about what you're talking about here. Ultimately, there's two ways to relate to God. There's a short way and a long way, and the long way would be through the details, through the Histalshlus, through Zinsuming, through all the spheros. And the other way, Tanya says, there is a valid way of reaching the Eibusher just through Avas Abba, through
Ava Musuteris. Yeah.
Which is your sort of what you're trying to say. Is that meaning that the Eibusher allows us in two ways? For example, you said about
I hear your question, but let me. I must respond to this.
You said that children, we're born children, so we have a process. But Adam, Rishon, and Chava were not born children. So within creation, they were born fully grown and established.
Only once.
So what I'm trying to say is that the Eibusher allows, and it says that when we're going to go back to the time of the Lasi Lavo, it's going to be like the time when we were in Gan Eden. So who knows that when the children are born then, they're not going to be born as adults. Which means, again...
first of all, 1 second, hold on. What you're saying...
There's going to be 6 children at a time. We're going to be born at birth. So I'm just saying, I'm not sure it's written, maybe not.
No, hold on. Your questions are legitimate, but they don't contradict at all, and let me clarify very clear. First of all, let's start with the Tanya.
Yes.
This short, long way, yes. You basically have to learn 52 chapters of Tanya to find that out. Those learning of 52 chapters is no way a short way. Even to learn the short way is heavy-duty learning. 1 second. Okay. The first thing. The second thing is the Derech Tzara, the Alter Rebbe doesn't get to till chapter 25. So why is he taking us for a long way before he takes us on the short way? Why doesn't he just jump to the short way?
Because he's dealing with, he's showing the short way through by relating it to people that are going the long way.
No, because there's no way to get to the short without the long, that's why.
Because what I'm trying to say to you, but the Baal Shem Tov says differently. Doesn't he say...
What's that? Hold on, the time... I hear your question, but I'm asking you a question. The short way, you're using the word short way. If you look at the Sharblot of Tanya, he says, B'derech Arucha K'tzara. He doesn't say b'derech tzara and arucha. He says first the long way. There's no way to get to the short way without the long way. That's the period.
Long way.
I'm not sure because
No. And also what you call the short way is unconscious. You can't get the Ava Mesuteres without the going through the Avodah. Simple as that. There's no magic tricks. There's no buttons. As much as we all love to have that, there's no magic tricks. And the best proof of it is like this. You're telling me, the fact is, Adam and Chava were once born at 20. After that, nobody. Is that an accident? Which one's the anomaly?
maybe it's because of
Which one? Are you?
because of the Avera.
No, but they were born before the Avera. They were before. No. And Matan Torah is also because of the Avera. You're forcing a case where if you look at evidence, Matan Torah came after 26 generations. That was the plan. Yes. First comes a gili from Umayla, Asus and Delayla. Then our self-generated initiative is the essence of it all. You cannot get away from that no matter what you do. And that is a process, and there's no way around that. If you show me one place that says otherwise, it cannot be, not the Baal Shem Tov, nobody. To say that it has a pintala, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't change it. That doesn't mean that's the work. That just means that there's a spark of hope in any situation. That would be, but that doesn't mean there's no effort. There's no avodah. You're taking away the whole Torah mitzvahs. Why is there a Torah mitzvahs? Is avodas Hashem, hard work. And you know something? And when you learn 100 times, the Alter Rebbe says becomes habit. That's not good enough. So there's no tricks. There's no way you can get around hard, exerted effort. The fact that you'll find me a situation where somebody lived a whole life of sin and then with 1 second did tshuva. But it's all anomalies. That's exceptions of exceptions that are never seen as the process in Torah. Then you might as well not educate your children and just hope. Why do you educate your children? Send them to school. Why don't you just hope for their spark of godliness to emerge? Let me ask you a question. Why is there a mitzvah of chinuch? Why don't we just rely that the spark is going to take care of everything?
Obviously, there's a mila to that because
kavonet, dire b'tachteinim. No. I'm not bending this 1 second unless you show me a direct source that contradicts it. There's nothing.
I would like to suggest such source. A source I'd like to suggest is that
I just told you, Tanya, after 25 chapters comes, and his derech tzara is how many chapters it takes him to explain the derech tzara? How many chapters? Do you know how many? 30, 40 chapters.
Kutzara.
Yeah. You think tzara means from here to here? Tzara means that instead of purely working on imposing your moyach shalat alalev, you have an unconscious ava to work with. Tell me something. Do you know anybody that finds it easy to serve God? Have you found somebody on this earth that finds it easy? If it's such a derech tzara, why is it so difficult for even the greatest of tzaddikim? Because that's the way it was meant to be. The whole Tanya is based on war, on a battle. So when Tanya says, like he said, Tanya says, the pasuk says, we learned it before. The Moshe says to the Jews, and now what is God already asking of you? L'yiras Hashem, all He's asking for you is to have fear of God. So the Gemara says, how could you say it's such a small matter? The Gemara says this, and then continue to say, for Moshe it's a small matter, and then the answer has to be is because there's a Moshe within all of us, and that too takes a lot of avodah. Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said to his students on his deathbed, Halavai, that you should fear God as much as you fear people. These are the greatest sages of this time. Do you know somebody that has a problem that fears God as much as they fear people? I'm proving to you in existence. There's no reality that you're talking about. So you're bringing me words. It's a derech tzara. You know something? It's nice. I would love it to be so, but I've not yet found a person that found it easy to serve God. It's a concealed world. It's a darkness.
I think there's two ways, and what
Are you talking theory, or I'm talking about 7 billion people on this earth? You know one person that has it easy to serve God?
I mean, the long way is through learning Torah.
Forget it. One second.
You said 26 chapters.
First of all, I'm telling you the short way is much longer than you think it is. And just using a word short. Secondly, there's no way to get to it without the look. And thirdly, you need both. And derech tzara, to say that you have a spark inside of you, and that's it, you can't get to it without the whole process. You negate the whole Avedas Hashem. What should I tell you? We're going around in circles here.
I haven't presented you asked me for a proof, and I'm trying to bring you a proof, and then you deny it. I'm saying that the whole...
So everything I said is meaningless?
No, it's not meaningless.
I have no validity to what I said?
That's a lot calculated, but I'm just responding to it, and I'd like you to hear what you have to say to this response. The response that I have.
I thought I answered your question.
No, because I'm listening to what you say, and I have an objection to it, so to speak. My objection to it, and then you'll rebut it, and then you'll prove it's wrong. The point here is that the whole kiddush of the Baal Shem Tov, the whole kiddush.
Show me where that says. I need a source for that.
A simple Jew, unlearned, never learned Torah in his whole life. Never did the law, no seichel, no mitzvahs, no.
Yeah, and the sentence.
But his pure obvious for Abbas Hashem, the Baal Shem will say, you guys can learn Torah a whole life, and this guy who says Tehillim because he can't even read it properly and just says Abba Shemayim,
Eliezer.
This Talmud Chacham never.
Do you think that's a contradiction to what I said?
I'm not saying a contradiction. I'm just saying there's two ways.
Is it a contradiction? You think to everything I've said? Why is it not a contradiction?
I'm saying that you're saying there's only one way to reach to the only through avoda through the pratim through tzimtzumim. I'm saying there's a short way where there's a valid avoda.
Well, one second. The short way you're using is time.
Obtain a relationship with God does not have to come through seichel.
But he works on it, saying Ayin Beis with him all day long.
The shepherd who comes in, it doesn't.
He works on what limit he has to.
That he said, you mean that he has this feeling of love towards his creator?
He puts energy into it all day.
Okay, let's continue on. Are you playing devil's advocate, or you really have this question? So you know what?
It's not a question. It's
I'm not going to say. I don't want to. I'm going to control my reaction, but it's very similar to that discussion we had about the Holocaust. I find if you really feel what you're saying, I think you have a fundamental flaw in understanding the Baal Shem Tov and the Derech Aruch and everything. It's a fundamental flaw in the whole picture, and it's a distortion of the Baal Shem Tov. Because if that's the case, why did the Baal Shem Tov himself why was he such a scholar? Why did he learn? Why didn't he just take that approach if he knew the secret of it? And you think he's advocating illiteracy, or he's saying that even in the darkest moment there's a spark? That's advocating darkness. Should those Anoshim Pshutim send their children to yeshiva, or should they just give their children the same experience they had? What he's saying is that don't give up on anyone, and saying not that there's another derech in Aveda. There's only one derech in Aveda. There's only one Torah for everybody. But if somebody, for whatever reason, was not there, so don't think that there's no hope. But he never made that a derech of not learning Torah and finding God without learning. That negates the whole Torah mitzvahs. No. I just said to you something. To say that somebody who's is almost dead and you find a spark of life and say, you know what, that's a derech to find.
No, I'm just saying that.
Did you hear? I responded to you. The Baal Shem Tov found where others may have not seen it. He saw that everywhere there's etzem is concealed, but not way. That's a derech for sure. Not. If that's a derech, then the whole thing. No such derech. There's no such approach. So we have a Torah mitzvahs, and Torah says this is the way you're supposed to teach your children. Chanech, you teach them chumash, and you have to go through the whole painstaking process of chinuch. Obviously, working together with that is that we have a neshama that's concealed and has very deep connection. And working together, you want to fan the flames of that neshama and bring it out into expression. That's Seder Aved. There's no other Aved. If you say somebody, God forbid, did the worst sins, and is there hope for tshuva? Yes. But is that a derech? The Torah says someone that says I'll sin and do tshuva will never be forgiven. It's not a derech like that. You can't call it a derech. That's what why am I Jacob Frank and the distorted versions of Shabtai Tzvi said that. The sparks are everywhere, so you might as well go there in the first place.
I'm not saying that at all.
But it's one step away from what you're saying. But more importantly, there's no such derech. The Baal Shem Tov never formed a derech. He said that love everybody unconditionally. In situations today, Teneka Shenishbu, everybody's got a neshama. We can't judge who has a higher soul. We're not talking about heights of souls. But the Aveda is to bring that neshama and express it. A criminal in prison also has a nitzut zelaki. But he's still in prison. Why is he in prison? You're not going to take him out of prison. Because if he could hurt another person, and if he's abusive, and if he's a murderer, I don't care how does the chelik come in mal mamish. Even the Baal Shem Tov will pray for him, but he's not going to take him out of prison if he's a danger to others. Because there's a Torah that also says that people who are dangerous should not be allowed to hurt others. There's also a death penalty in the Torah. I mean, All this, the Baal Shem Tov couldn't have negated any of that. Misnagdim, by the way, distorted the Baal Shem Tov to saying that. That the Baal Shem Tov, like I even heard someone say, Chabad is for the ignorant. Eish is for the scholars. The Baal Shem Tov saved simple Jews. The Gra saved Torah. To me, when I hear that, my blood curdles. Because that's what they're doing. They're trying to make the Baal Shem Tov into a derech. It's not the derech of Torah, it's the derech for simple people who don't know how to learn. Give them, we also, God loves them. Fine. It's not that way. The Alter Rebbe was a major scholar. The Rebbe writes in letters that if the Alter Rebbe was a major scholar and he went to the Maggid, who went to the Baal Shem Tov, you have to say the Baal Shem Tov was a major scholar. And it wasn't... Anyway, the bottom line is there's many places in Sikhs that actually address your question, and very adamant terms, more than adamant than me. The Rebbe was completely... It's like... This is like an insult to Chassidus, that type of approach. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I think it's an...
While we're just meandering a little, I just want to get this thing. Can you just give me the process of a 15-year-old kid that has a choice to go to shul, put on tefillin, or play baseball with his friends? But the only way you can have a chira... See, I think what the Rebbe is speaking about now is only what the obvious, not the chira could be. But he doesn't show the process of the chira at all. And I think every time when the person makes that decision, it's an atmos decision. When the kid decides to put on tefillin and not go running around with his friends at 15 years old and playing baseball or something. And I think that always the atmos comes in. He's just not putting in. He's just not mentioning something that would negate. He's pushing aside some argument that would negate it, but he's not showing the process at all of the chira. And if you agree with me, we'll stop. If you don't agree with me, tell me why I'm wrong.
I don't agree with you because you really haven't learned this subject matter thoroughly enough, as I have, for us to be in the same league. You heard something about Atzmos. You haven't learned this properly. That's what I'm saying. If you learned this properly and you still had this question, we would discuss it.
I've been thinking about this for 50 years, right?
Yeah, but so if that's the case, then I'll tell you there's Maimorim to learn that talk about this in detail, and they don't all cite Atzmos. So you have to wonder why the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Rashab.
For godliness.
Now, why don't they bring this Atzmos that you think is the key to the answer? That's my question to you in turn. They also thought about it. Why don't they bring this Atzmos?
Maybe it's just to solve it.
No, I'm saying, maybe, but that's why I'm saying, the only way to really get to this is, I don't agree with you, but the way to really address it is to learn it inside.
Because he's not showing a mechanism.
Have you learned it at length? I told you where this is taken from.
Okay.
This is taken from an entire mimer, from the Alter Rebbe said a mimer in the year 5565, Tovko Samachei. It's a 30-page mimer. I would begin with learning that, and it's a subject. It's a big subject matter. And they don't bring Atzmos there at all. They bring this, and you can explain the mechanism very easily from there, actually, in my opinion. You could still say, this doesn't negate that if you go deeper, there's an Atzmos element. There's a different, I'm not saying there aren't. There are actually three explanations for how free will. From a Mala, Seviv, and Atzmos. And they're all legitimate in each level.
It exists with Hashgacha Pratis, it's the same.
Yeah.
That's from Samachay. What was the name at the beginning of the mimer? What's the pasuk?
Kisisa. The mimer,
Kisisa.
Sodden Osav Timkar is the actual mimer from the Alter Rebbe.
In Samachay.
Yeah. You have to remember, in Atzmos there's no such thing as Hashgacha Pratis. That's the first reason I wouldn't go where you're going. Hashgacha Pratis is already a manifest, conscious divinity. Atzmos doesn't have Hashgacha Pratis. Atzmos is so detached, and it built him Mitzias Nimtza. The whole Atzmos. So there's no contradictions altogether. There's no questions. There's no answers. Everything is possible there. No, so there God could be holding your hand, and you see Him holding your hand, and you still have free will, even though it doesn't make any sense. So the whole question doesn't exist there. We're talking about where there's a question and there's an answer.
I'm talking down here too.
No, but you're using Atzmos. As soon as you talk Atzmos,
I mentioned the godliness, maybe to be sober. It's not that. There's a certain point where.
Well, maybe that's what. So maybe what you're calling Atzmos is called Seviv here. Fine, so be it. The bottom line is, in chapter 60, he made it very clear that the idea in Ak, is similar to the idea before the Tzimtzum. that's detached. It exists, it gives life to everything, but it does not impact the free will of a person, and that's why we can choose to defy God and go against God. But yet there is some seeping in of this energy in the fact that we are alive. So chayis, the fact that we are alive, means that we're receiving, there's some bittul. So there's something that is manifest. But clearly he says, yes, what you call atzmus, for all practical purposes, you can call seviv and makifir.
You work with atzmus.
Okay, you said atzmus is godliness. Yeah, obviously. No, that I don't know where that says anywhere. By the way, that line I've never seen. This is saying here has nothing to do with chelik el kal mamash. He's just saying the godly energy that gives life does not have to influence that life to make choices, because it's detached. He says it's not. That's what he says. That's exactly the words. Anyway, I told you to learn the Rebbe's Maimarim. The first thing the Rebbe would tell you is my Maimarim come as after 6 generations of Maimarim, and the Rebbe told this to us hundreds of times. So anyone that brings the Rebbe's Maimar as a source it's like bringing a source from Shulchan Aruch without looking at the Gemara. You can't do that. Obviously, the Rebbe says something; it's correct, but it's not coming in a vacuum. It's coming in the context, and the Rebbe is adding and emphasizing. There's no question there's additions in this concept of the Bechira. There's a long article we've written on this whole thing, the 3 levels of Bechira. If you want to read it, you can read it. You can see the 3 dimensions, what we're discussing here. Okay, so now we go to chapter 61 after all this. What time did we have? 1:35. It's a long chapter, which we're not going to get through. Okay. So he's continuing now the discussion of the impact of transcendence in our existence. And remember, transcendence is not concealed immanence. What I mean by that is, it's not like, you're not yet a container for it, and you'll grow a little and expand your container, you'll be able to contain it. It's fundamentally transcendent. It's fundamentally not containable by existence. And yet, it has impact on existence. That's the key thing that he's discussing here. So V'yesh Leimer, chapter 61, bottom of page 113. V'yesh Leimer Oid, we can say another explanation. Additionally, we can say, and all this is going back to what is the impact of Adam Kadmon on our world. The beginning of chapter 60. According to what it says in Likkutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe, in Tazria, the Maimer lam natzeach al hashminis. The b'chinas ak hagam shlei shayach b'yislapshus b'chinas pnimi, that the level of Adam Kadmon, even though it's not possible for it to have a enclosed, manifest in an internal way, like I just said, it's just not containable by containers. It's transcendent, fundamentally transcendent. Mikol mokim ha'orez gilui zeh. Nevertheless, you have to say a reflection of this revelation. Mukhrach liyaz b'Yisrael. You have to say that it exists inside of Israel. Ubagos l'sham, and in the comments there, the gloss there, that means generally the Tzemach Tzedek, Mavur explains, Shezeh inyan mashiknas Yisrael niklakala m'loshen kolsa nafshi. That this is the inyan that Knesset Yisrael, which literally means the gathering of Israel. Knesset Yisrael is the level of malchut, congregation of Israel, right? Is called kala.
Where is it moved from? It's moved from. As we said before,
No, the Alter Rebbe says that language. It's a language from the Alter Rebbe that you must say. So he's saying that's what he says. Well, that's what Knesset Yisrael is called, kala, the bride. Kala comes from the word kolsa nafshi. My soul expires. My soul yearns. My soul pines. Pines, I would say. Kolsa. Koloyan, it's yearns, reaches up to kolsa nafshi. So that meloshin kolson after yesh b'kol echad yisrael b'nitzus nishma lichl lidvuk b'Hashem echad. That every one from Israel has within the spark of his soul to be encompassed, ulidbik, and to cleave b'Hashem echad, in the one God. Va'avazu yesh b'kol b'koyach kol echad v'Yisrael b'tmidus. Here you go. You're talking now Baal Shem Tov language. And this love is in the power of everyone of Israel, b'tmidus, constantly. It's not sporadic. Tmidus. V'kameshikasu l'mayin zamrecha kovid v'lo yodum. Laman, in order to zamrecha kovid, to sing his praises, to sing his glory, v'lo yodum, and never to be silent. And never silent. Meaning it's kodet toder v'lo shachich. He's always calling out v'lo shachich, and never abates, never subsides. So you see here that not only is it within everyone, it's in everyone all the time, and it never subsides. Even with people who are of the lowest stature, ignoramuses, they have this level as well. Nevertheless, it's not felt in any conscious way, benafshim in their soul, tamid constantly. It's only concealed in a form of makif, which means unconscious or transcendent, and protects it. It's like hovers above them and protects them from above. That's why every one of Israel has the power to give his life on kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, bli shum tam v'das, without any logic, without any rationale. Bli shum tam v'das hasogus alakus, without any rationale and comprehension of godliness, rak b'bchinas amuna, only in a state of faith. Which means that it surrounds him. It encompasses Mamayla from above, from Mamayla min ha-seichel. It's higher than seichel. Seichel would mean it penetrates and pervades him in some way, internalized way. Here, why does he have the power to give his life? Because in it, in a makivdika way, no matter who he is, there's a revelation of ak in there. And that power is there all the time. But it's concealed. And look, and Delvin says what says Likkutei Torah in the explanations via Daita, that's Veschan in chapter 3. In the subject that faith is called crown, like Keser. It's a crown. So that and the root of faith in the souls of Israel is because Mazleo, their mazel seeds. There's the famous story in Tanakh by Daniel, that they came and they shuddered. I say, what are you shuddering from? So he says, they don't see, but there's mazel. Something in their soul sees, so they're shuddering, they're trembling. So mazleh chazi means there's something inside that sees, even though we consciously are not in touch, but it's like being in presence of something and you're affected even though you do not consciously aware of it. This is in the root of the soul above, that his connection, his bond to the godliness is because of the mazleh that sees. Mazel is like sometimes means sign, but mazel neshama is like the root of sometimes the soul's source. So it's the mazel of the neshama, basically. So mishum mazleh chazer roya amitis achdus Hashem, and this mazel that sees the truth of the divine unity. Alkein ef shalaliyas nifrat chadrashal. That's why the soul cannot be separate, God forbid, because it senses this divine unity and that it's part of it, and just cannot separate from that. Again, this is all unconscious and all in the root. We have to say in the parentheses he adds that this is not the essential connection. We're not talking here about the chelik elikam amal mamish, meaning he doesn't say that word, but the essential connection of a neshama and the essence of God. Because that is a high. That's why I didn't go there. That's how it's rooted in atzmos. Here we're talking even in Giluyim, even in a world where there's already some manifestation, some revelation, like Seviv. Even there's something Because what's musha shenatzmus, you could say never is expressed. It's just connected. It's a connection, doesn't even need expression. It's like a connection between a parent and a child, doesn't need any form of expression. It's just there and that's it. Here he's talking, he says, tzarech lema, that all that we're talking about is already some type of manifestation. Remember, transcendence, let's go back to the If you talk about atzmos, the whole word transcendence, immanence, in, out, symptom, it's irrelevant.
Doesn't apply.
Right. But that atzmos wants it all. So that's our connection, through the desire, that he wants it.
That's already so.
Yeah, but now we have now transcendence in its source, as we said, is just the reality of God that envisions an existence. So really immanent, the whole Pnimi is just a from the perspective of above, is not shefa, it's how God sees the picture. But when it manifests in our world, it's called transcendence. So even there, you have a connection. That's the point. Even in those levels, you have a connection. But it's still transcendent. It's not a conscious connection. Meaning it still requires Aveda, which is going to be the key point here. But he wants to say that Ak has impact. It gives us that. Let's put it this way. What the Baal Shem Tov says, that every Jew has this spark. We're not talking now the Etzem. We're talking that is really in this language is Ak's influence. Without Ak, it wouldn't have that, what he's calling here, that Ava, that sense, that constant love and connection, unconscious connection, that causes a person to have mesirat nefesh. It's coming from Ak. However, below, in the root of the soul, it seizes divine unity. Below, it comes in the form of faith. So faith is now the expression of it. Just faith without any logic. Supra-rational faith. And it's explained elsewhere, the take of that the intense faith, the intense simple faith in the souls of Israel, is because their mazel sees, because it sees the truth of the thing. He's adding more. In other words, in the root of the soul, again, we're not talking about an atzmus in existence, in the structure somewhat. It's connected. But he's saying that but down below, what does it express itself? When you see the simple faith of a person, that he just has faith in God. There's no reason, didn't come to it philosophically. That faith is a glimmer of the soul seeing God's unity. So only a little is seeping through. It's called faith. And that faith, the intensity of that faith is coming because his soul actually sees. So it's not just, he's dissecting where that faith is. There's levels going on here. So there's an atzmisdika connection. He says that's not what we're discussing now. We're discussing that in the transcendent energy of existence is seeping through into existence, and that's the faith in every neshama, in every individual. The mazel, yeah, the mushrash. The mazel is basically the the unconscious part of the soul.
Is it in ach? Where is mazel? This level.
Mazel could be yechida. Chayo yechida of the neshama is what I would say.
But in the terms that we're talking about, as far as this
Ak is the Ratzon Klali, the general desire for all of existence. Ak in turn, remember it's microcosm, macrocosm. We are created b'tzelem Elokim, so we have an Ak within us, so to speak. That Ak is usually chayo yechida. I would say chayo of the neshama is mazel.
Chayo of neshama.
Yeah, and the worlds would be chayo of the worlds. It's like arich. Ak is called arich of the world. It's like keser. Arich more specifically.
Why wouldn't you say yechida of the world?
Because yechida is more connected to the etzem. That's what I would say here. Arich is more correct. He's probably going to say it later. I'm almost sure that's what it says in. Ask him. He's be specific. He doesn't say exactly. I think it's arich. I would say it's arich. It's the rotz.
Literally mean flow, though.
What is what? Mazel? Yeah, meizlim, min alavona means the flow. But mazel also sometimes the mazel like mazel aryeh. The mazel is the sign. But mazel comes from the word flow because it's like a channel. Mazel is the channel that brings energy into the soul. You say mazel in the neshama is usually speaking the soul's instinct or the soul's sensation from its source. It's like
it's a flow too. And you said it was so.
Fine. He doesn't say it specifically. I would say if you ask me where it is, I would place it in arich in the neshama, which is chaya.
And in the stashus of the world.
That's ak. That's ak. That is ak. That's the whole thing is coming from ak. V'yesh leimer, and we can say the sheresh hamuna oid l'maylam b'chinas mazleha. You could say, I'm saying even deeper now. The root of the faith is even higher than mazleha, the sign or the flow. Shari b'riyah yesh gam ken chiluk madregas, because in seeing there's also different levels. Remember, it says mazleha chazi means to see. There's levels in seeing. So there's a seeing how the mazel sees, and there's even higher. The source of the soul of the faith is even higher than that. We can say the same thing in this. We say that his mazel sees. There's also levels. That's how he's saying it. So he's saying the mazleh chazi, there's levels, but the faith that he's talking about is in everyone equally. That's more ak. Mazleh chazi is, remember we said before, ak, makif is an equalizer. So you need something that's equal in everyone. Mazleh chazi, you could say there's distinctions between one soul and another, based on their source. Here he's going deeper, so it's coming from, so mazleh maybe is not arich. Maybe it's neshama. Okay, fine. Yeah. No, I'm saying, where's mazla from? Because it's drawn, it extends, it transmits from a higher level than mazla. And this, from there comes the sanctifying God's name that comes within Israel, and also the hidden love that has within everyone concealed, lichlel, to be encompassed, to lidvuk, and to be attached, cleave. Now it goes to bechira. And on this, yesh bechira b'cholach Yisrael ha'etzia bezgalus mahastira. And on this we have, this is bringing back to the last chapter. And on this we have the will within everyone of Israel to draw out le'etzia bezgalus mahastira, from the concealed state to bring it into a revealed state. Sheyer gam b'sichlei u'meicher u'belibei. That it should radiate also in his seichel, in his intelligence, and in his mind, and in his heart. So yes, it's there, but think of it like a pilot flame. It's there, just like there's the spark of the divine in every piece of food and everything in existence. That doesn't mean it's not trapped. So it's there, but it's concealed. It's an unconscious state. And the bechira of a person, because remember, it's makif. Makif means it's detached. It's just not forcing your hand. Just because you have a hidden love, and that you have the faith, the simple faith, all of us equally at all time, and the desire to connect to God from the root, that doesn't mean you're acting on it. That's where will play comes into play. That's the level of kala that he said in the beginning, the bride, kleis hanefesh. Yeah, you could say the expiring of the soul, the yearning of the soul, the kiloyan, the pining of the soul. L'shor shemakeret, to its source, to its root and its source, b'libay, b'nafshi, b'me'edei mamish, b'me'edei mamish. This is the v'hafta as Hashem elkecha b'chol avavcha b'chol nafshcha b'chol me'edecha. That's what he's referring to here. So believe it with his heart, v'nafshi, nafshcha with his soul, u'b'me'edei, with all his might mamish, literally. So that's v'hafta as Hashem elkecha b'chol avavcha b'chol nafshcha b'chol me'edecha. That's a mitzvah that doesn't come automatically. You have it inside of you in a concealed way, but you have to do something about it. And this, which is concealed within the soul of Israel, that comes from the reflection of the level of ak. That is in the form of makif, meaning non-containable, non-integrated in the souls of Israel, to be in a state of soul exploration and to give their life. And it's concealed in the souls of Israel, and it's in his power and potential ability to bring it out from the concealed to the revealed. Then he goes to parentheses, and look at what it says in Likkutei Torah there. He's talking about Lamnatzeach Hashminis, Tazria. This reflection comes from the inner dimension of Ak. And this is specifically in the souls of Israel. She's Yisrael, all the machshava. Because Israel arose in his mind, in his thought, to be more precise. The pirush alu b'machshava, what does it mean? Alu b'machshava means rose, alu, like almost elevated. So he says, Haynu b'chinas aliyena sheb'machshava. Alu meaning in the higher state of his thought. V'hu sheb'machshava geduma da'ak, in the primordial thought of ak. Alu b'chinas apnimis v'nimshecha ha'ara misham l'kol echad Yisrael. They arose in the inner dimension, and from there the reflection was transmitted into each one of Israel. So think of it like this. We said ak envisions all of existence. Everything. From even a leaf turning in the wind. So what's the difference? So he says in Likkutei Torah, there's pnimius machshava and there's chitzenius machshava. The outer dimension of the thought looks at all of existence, everything in time and space, from beginning of time till the end of time, sees one big snapshot. But the inner thought, which is like what's the real purpose of it all, in pnimius ak is the inner thought is about the souls of Israel. And that's where the bittul comes from. One second. And the bittul that we said earlier in the previous chapter, that everything that stands upright bows to you, prostrates. That bittul comes from the outer dimension of ak. Because all creatures have that bittul. Everything has that potential bittul. So that comes from the outer. And it's in them, not in any form of feeling at all. Meaning that in the soul, you say there is a little feeling, seemingly. There's no feeling at all. But so there's two states of bittul. One comes chitzenius. So both are impacted by ak. He's now adding from the Likkutei Torah that there's a deeper dimension. Yeah? Ak is makif. So that's it. Ak is always a makif here.
Pnimius of makif and
you mean chitzenius ak is being pnimius? No. Here he's talking as a makif. Ak has pnimius too, but generally speaking, ak is, as a matter of fact, in Samach Vav, he actually says, Yeshlemer, it comes from igulim da ak. He's more precise, from the levels of igulim of ak, which is the makif, and within ak itself. But here it's obvious, he's talking here the makif of ak, not makif as a pnimi. We discussed this yesterday. He's definitely talking I'm talking here as ak, as the rotzen klali. Rotzen is always makif. The general desire for all of existence. He sees all of existence, including, so the outer dimension creates bittul in all of the shtach v'lefanecha, and the inner creates this deeper bittul that he's talking about here, which is mesirat nefesh. You're not going to have mesirat nefesh. Every creature has a sense, has some type of bittul concealed in it. Look, animals have bittul, but you don't call it mesirat nefesh on kiddush Hashem. You just say they have bittul because they follow God's orders. They don't defy God's orders.
When you have the pnimius, we're just talking about the aspects of...
The pnimius is two sides. You have more bechira, but you have also deeper mesirat nefesh.
When we're talking about...
In other words, the pnimius you could say is even more detached than the chitzenius. But on the other hand, its impact on us is much deeper. Because mesirat nefesh is what animals, the shamas have that, not other creatures.
Because we're so very makif as more than just a circle around, but something that's penetrating.
Exactly.
When he talks about the Sonny is talking about the around, and then now he's talking about also what you're made of as a pnimius. Is that the difference, or is it something else?
No, he's talking that even though it's fundamentally transcendent and beyond, but it's within existence everywhere, and it has impacts. He's giving some of the. Basically, he's describing our personality. That some of it is coming from ak, seeping in. Something is leaking in.
By its nature, it's also the substance of the world. The whole world is... Yeah,
the substance of the world. That's the Kol Kaim Mushtach V'Lefanecha. That's the previous chapter.
That's not more than a year or anything like that. This is the substance of the world. That's not really what he's referring to now.
He's not talking about the creation of the substance. Now he's talking about more awareness. Some type of...
I don't understand what he means by pnimius.
There's no pnimius here at all. There's no pnimius here. Pnimius ak. It's the source from the inner dimension of ak. That's not mak. It's still makif. It's just the pnimius of the makif. The chitzenius of the makif. We're not talking about the pnimius of the person. When a person has a thought, for example, to create a piece of art, there's the elements of thought, is what paint he has to gather, and the details. And then there's the thought that talks about what's the message that he wants to convey in the art. The same machshava has an inner and outer. It's like the means and the end, if you wish. So that's one thing that's established. So he's now talked about a second impact of ak on existence. And additionally, we will understand the reflection of ak that's within each one of Israel. That's the preface that we say naaseh nishma. That we first say we will do, and then we will understand. Like it says in the Mishnah in the Brachas in the Gemara. In the Mishnah in Masechta Brachas. Lama kadmon shema v'hayim shemaya. Why Shema precede v'hayim shemaya? In Shema we say first Shema, and then we say Baruch Shem, then we say v'hayim shemaya. The Gemara answers b'kdei she'ikabel alav el malchut shomayim tchil v'achakach yikabel alav el mitzvahs. In order that first you should receive the yoke of heaven, and afterwards you should receive the yoke of mitzvahs. V'yadu, and it's known the kabolat el malchut shomayim hu inyan habittul ein sof baal harotzen. What's the difference in Aveda? What's the difference between these two levels? You're both accepting the yoke from above. So the answer is, the difference is, that the first is the bittul to ein sof baal harotzen, the one who desires. Not his desire itself, but baal harotzen, the owner of the desire, so to speak. Litzis kol mashu huratzeni is bara b'kiyum hamitzvus. To desire everything that he wants, everything but God's desire, in fulfillment of mitzvahs, I accept. It's like a total acceptance of God Himself, the one who desires, not a specific commitment. nishma. And by contrast, kabolat el mitzvahs means accepting this mitzvah, v'ahavta. Then you speak of kshatim al yadecha, tefillin, mezuzah, chinuch, and so on. Like we spoke earlier about the and this is Agdama when we say, as they first said, we will do and then we will understand or we will hear. Nishma, hearing or commitment or understanding, is already lekabel. Well, nishma here is not understanding. Nishma means to listen. Is referring to lekabel, to accept gili haratzenis pratim, to accept the revelation of the specific individual desires of God. So then the bittul is to the desire. What do you want me to do? Want me to do this? Okay. So it's a connection to the thing you want me to do. The specific desire. The naaseh nishma, and the naaseh that comes before nishma, meaning I will do this general acceptance that comes before the specifics, who are bittul erein sof balarotzen. That's the bittul to God Himself. The erein sof, that's the owner of the desire, meaning
whole different take on naaseh b'nishma. Whole different take. Wow.
It's a different explanation, yeah. For who shema kabbalah love bittul harotzen b'chlal, and that he accepts upon that, and this is that he accepts upon himself the bittul harotzen b'chlal, the total subjugation of his own desire. Sheyilei rotzen b'chala sheyishmem b'hakadosh baruch hu. We should not confuse the two things. We're talking about the desire of God and talking about human, that he should completely mevatel his desires. That sheyilei rotzen b'chala sheyishmem b'hakadosh baruch hu. That he should have a desire. But from everything that is heard from God, he should accept. And even though this first higher level, the accepting the yoke of heaven, is not a form of revelation, it's not his galus harotzen, it's not a revealed desire. That's the union of kabolat in general. It's a koyach nelam, it's a concealed power. It's not expressed power. How do you express kabolat? It's an acceptance. Whatever you want, I will do. When you learn Torah, you're sitting down, you're using your mind. When you do a mitzvah, you're acting. This kabolat is a koyach nelam. It's just it's a state of mind, basically. It's a state of suspending yourself. It's a state of surrender. Surrender is called a koyach nelam for that reason. V'kabolah hu lasis b'pel mamish. V'kabolah, and the acceptance is lasis b'pel mamish, to fulfill, to actualize, to lasis b'pel mamish, to bring into lasis b'pel mamish, to realize in action. Lo dafka mashareitza, ki gam im yichabed Allah, huh? One second. Lo dafka mashareitza. What's that? Not dafka. In other words, that he should. That the Kabbalah. What's the acceptance? What's the commitment? That you should commit to action Even that which you don't want, desire, even if the thing is difficult or heavy, difficult for him, he has no excuse, and no hesitation and resistance at all. So all this, a Kabbalah, is all really, in truth, a hidden koyach, a hidden power. But nevertheless, there is in it a desire. There's the commitment to it, so to speak. And that is Kabbalah Sel Malchus is Bar Baratzen. That you've accepted, you've chosen to accept this yoke of heaven. That's naaseh. Only thing is, it's not a revealed desire in a form that goes out of what is mitzvah mahadarga? Mahadarga.
From that level.
Rak she'enim bizgal zman b'chinas yitzia mahadroga or mahadarga. I'm not sure what he means mahadarga. Bottom line, it's revealed Ratzon means where the Ratzon is manifesting in some way. Like I said, it's desiring something. Here, it's not expressing itself, but it's there.
A drug or like slow.
I'm not sure. But there's a very powerful and intense desire in the nefesh. The Ayin is Gal Saratzon Ubi Spilas Benefesh Ubi Yitzia Megeder Kelim. That's what he means, Megeder, Hagdaroge. Hagdaroge, he means Yitzia Madroge is going out of the containers. That's what he's. It's expression means that Gal Saratzon means you're going out of your container, your confinement. It is Hadroge, not Hadarge. I thought so. Hadroge. It's going out of your structure, so to speak. So he says, what is revealed desire is when you have excitement in your soul, but you see a megeder kelim and you go out of your containers. Yeah, that's what he means. And kabolat hamashmach is you're not actively in a conscious and revealed way expressing something. It's just a total acceptance within yourself. That's how he's defining it. And even the acceptance of the yoke of heaven on Rosh Hashanah should be zgalos haratzon. That is, in some form of revelation, ein zeh b'spailas b'nefesh. It's not with an excitement in the soul. Ki im hu b'chinas mesirat v'nesina. It's a mesirat, giving yourself, nesina and commitment. B'chol atzmusei, your whole essence. Shemeiser v'nesin kol atzmei mohusei lelikus. That he gives all himself away, himself and his essence to godliness. V'hu begili b'nafshei, and it's revealed in his nefesh. But it's still not in a, I think the best way to say it's not a defined expression. That's Kalim. Ratzon, that's a defined expression would be, okay, God wants, I'm committed to whatever the king wants, whatever God wants. Rosh Hashanah, that's revealed more than the rest of the year. Then God said, go put on tefillin. God said, v'shinamtem levanecha. God said, put on a mezuzah. So now you go out of you're going, you get excited about that specific thing, and you go ahead, and you go out, you see Megeder Kelim, you go out of your own structure, so to speak, and do something.
That's still naaseh, though.
That's nishma, what I just said. That's specific mitzvahs.
We always learned that naaseh and nishma naaseh was doing the mitzvahs. Now we're here, and now we're talking about nishma as actually doing the specific.
Okay. So the Kabbalah sel machal shomayim dechol hashana eina begili b'nefesh. The acceptance of the yoke of heaven all the year round is not revealed in the soul. And the yoke of heaven, accepting the yoke of Rosh Hashanah, is revealed in the soul. Look, these are very subtle levels, the revelations here, because, this revelation a little more, a little less, he's going now into naaseh nishma. But it's not a yitzia megeder kelim. It's not going out of your containers, out of your structure. Because it's not in containers. Because Kabbalah Samach is not in containers. It's not a containerable thing. The other Ratzon has some connection to containers.
Why would he even mention it?
No, because it's a compare. He's trying to explain how Ak is influencing that higher one. The lower one is influenced probably by lower levels of makifim, I'm assuming. So even though it's not a particular expression, see, Tziyim Megeder Kelim is also a little can be confusing, because usually Tziyim Megeder Kelim means like when you have simcha, you go out of your kelim. I don't think he means that here. He means here that there's a rotzen that is like merutza and drawn to something that is outside of, that has some structural element to it. That's what he means here. You have to say that's what he means, because he's not saying that the other one is not. But Tzima Hadroge. Hadrog is not drips. Where do you get that? Hadrog is structure, is levels. Levels. Hadrog is like dargis. It's like the structure of levels. It's still a very strong one in the Soviet Gamkin, the Bavedas Eved. It's also known that in the service of a servant, there's a pleasure, what he's fulfilling the desire of the master. This is the joy of a mitzvah. That when you perform a mitzvah, an action, it should be with joy. Like it says in this parsha, actually, Kisave, that he's doing now the mimer, that because you did not serve with complete joy and gladness of heart, even though the Aveda service with joy is the kavanah, the intention of the mitzvahs, because in this form of service, he knows and he feels that he's accomplishing something. And he also knows that he's transmitting, he's drawing down and generating through this giluyim, revelations in the world, the giluyim benafshe, and revelations in his soul. So clearly this is a very clear, specific intention that's connected to him and his interests, so to speak. It's like the kavana. Whereas when you're accepting the yoke of heaven, it's not with a feeling like he's accomplishing something. We'll soon explain what he's going here. And also his intention there is not for any other motive than just serving. Remember we talked before about bittul? The bittul is only in order to, it's only to gili hamoyer, it's only the gili etzem, to reveal the essence. His intention is not in order to bring revelation to the world. And definitely not to draw it into his own impersonal soul. It's only to perform, to fulfill the desire of God. Nevertheless, there's a joy within from this. The joy of fulfilling the divine desire. So it's not the joy of accomplishing something, of bringing something into this world or into your soul. Right. Like for example, a simple person who fulfills the desire of a great man, he has great joy from it. The same thing as the joy in fulfilling the mitzvahs, because he fulfilled the supernal desire, the higher is God's desire. So bottom line, what he's saying here is that there's two levels of the simcha. There's one that's connected to specific mitzvah, like the Kabbalah sale mitzvahs, connected to kavonas ha-mitzvahs and so on, which is already specific and has to do with a particular function and so on. And then there's the simcha that's connected to the Kabbalah sale in general. It's all coming to express, all this is going to be explained as ak, which is not shefa, that reveals the essence. It's not for a function purpose. It's all expression of that makiv that's impacting our lives. Well, and even higher than this, and even higher than this is the pleasure in the tainig, the pleasure that the master will have. So he's going even deeper now. So there's a simcha from the fulfillment that the desire of your master is being fulfilled. And then there's a pleasure because of the pleasure that your master has. That's even higher. You see what's going on here? In Gili Ha'etzem itself, there's even a higher.
It's his simcha with the Adam Tainig.
The lower one is his simcha, but it's only a simcha from fulfilling the desire I don't know if it's his simcha, it's the simcha. Here it's the joy is the joy of the master. It's not even about him altogether. V'hainu shemesanig b'tainug shalamayla the nachas ruach lefonish shamat naaseh etzeni. That means that he has pleasure from the pleasure above the nachas ruach lefonei, the nachas, the joy before me, because shamati, because I stated, and naaseh etzeni, you did what I asked you to do. The tainug shalamayla zeo tainug shaloi. The pleasure above, that becomes his pleasure. Like it says elsewhere, and look what it says later, chapter 174. So from this we all have is that the accepting the yoke of heaven has in it rotzen v'tainuk, has desire and pleasure. And what is called accepting the yoke, which apparently doesn't have anything in it, it doesn't mean it's just a yoke and compelled and imposed upon you. Its main focus is not that it's heavy load and that it's forced, it's that it's complete commitment, that you're completely giving yourself and committing to it. In Yiddish. Complete giving of yourself. But that doesn't, and it doesn't come from rational and logic. Rather, it comes, he's giving himself, committing himself to be a servant. This thing of giving yourself over. The same thing also exists by a teacher and a student, by a transmitter and a recipient, a teacher and a student, and by a lover and a beloved. The recipient or the beloved gives himself to the mashpia, to the transmitter, to his beloved. The lover gives himself over to the beloved. But that's a commitment that comes with logic. That's because he's receiving a transmission from mashpia, from the giver. And like the transmission of seichel, for example, or not, and similar. And this transmission is good for him. He's benefiting from it. We just
learned that it's good with God too, because it's going to eventually...
He didn't finish. He's just going to explain it. But he didn't finish his explaining. He brought the example, he's going to explain it. 1 second. So this, because it does good for him, causes closeness in a way that he commits himself to him. The naaseh hakiru be'ev g'zeh. Who's giving himself to whom here? Okay, that he gives. The same thing with a lover and a beloved. That's because of his awareness of his quality. That's why he gets closer to him, and commits to him, and gives himself over to him. However, the idea of servitude, it's not because of the awareness and the knowledge of the qualities of the master, or not because of the transmission that he receives from him. Because a servant actually prefers hefkeris, complete no commitment. An eved by nature is wants chaos, not chaos. Wants to have no authority at all. Hefker.
He's forced.
The same thing is also spiritual. How do you translate that? Shaloi toiv hashpa hu shapel. Shaloi tiv.
Not the good of the...
Shaloi tiv hashpa hu shapel alav. It's not the goodness of the transmission that affects him, because on his own, he's completely not in that realm. Ki'im, rather, hu nosen u'masr v'nosen alav. Ki'im u'nosen v'nosen alav. Ki'im u'nosen u'masr. Rather, he's given over and completely dedicated. And he's given and he's committed to him only because of the servitude that he accepted upon himself to be his servant. Right, not because of the goodness. And that's the meaning of Kabbalah sale. Not that it's forced upon you, or that it's to negate any type of logical ulterior motive. Only because of the oil, the yoke that he accepted the servitude, the yoke of the servitude that he accepted upon himself. All this is to explain that it's not like some type of punishment or some type of that doesn't have any joy. It has within a desire and a pleasure. Except that joy, that desire and that pleasure is not in the Giluyim because of what he's accomplishing. It's in the etzem. It's in the desire. It's in the contentment of that the will has been fulfilled, or in the joy, even higher, the joy of the master. So if it's desire and pleasure, what exactly is the accomplishment? Is because the yoke of heaven is that there shouldn't be any opposition and resistance at all. In other words, what do you need kabbalah sel? If he's having pleasure and from the pleasure of the master, or from it being his desire being fulfilled, why do you need kabbalah sel? Why do you call it accepting the yoke? He says because that's in order to get rid of any opposition and resistance that you may have. So there should be no block or obstacles and resistance at all. Even in the things even the things that the master is asking of him that he has no desire. No, shaloi yesh lei rotzen behem v'hem hepech letzene. Shaloi. He does not have does not have a desire, and they're opposite of his desire. Ach zel madrega tachtenim ba'avdus. However, all this is the lower level of servitude. For Inyan Eved Kanani, this is the servant, the Kanani, the Canaanite servant. She'ein lei shum rotzen ve'eser rak mitzad ela odin shalav. Has no desire. And he does only because of the yoke of the master upon him. The true yoke of heaven, accepting the yoke of heaven, that he has a desire and pleasure in the service. It's just not for his own benefit. Canal. This power is in the souls of Israel because they're rooted in Ak. So he explained, basically, in the servitude itself that he talked about here, there's a lower level and there's a higher level. You can be just completely dedicated just to the work, blindly, and that can be someone that's Avid Kanani too. So there's no Giluyim, there's no revelations. It's not nishma, it's naaseh. But what he's talking here is deeper. That there is he could have, so there would be no desire at all. Here there is a desire and there's a pleasure, but it's not for him. It's for the divine. And that is Ak. Going back, that's the root, that's rooted in Ak. Because Ak is called Raivid Dechol Raivan. The will of all wills. The desire of all desires. Rotzen l'rotzen, the desire for desire. And from there it transmits to the souls of Israel. And there extends to the souls of Israel this power, bittul to have the subjugation of their desire, to desire everything that God desires. That's what it says Moshe wrote for them. When you say Parsha Maseh, he wrote for them all their exits to their journeys, all the story of all their journeys. The Maitzeyim who meloshen u'kamoitzemayim. Maitzeyim means, it's from the expression kamoitzemayim, like water, kamoitzemayim, like drawing water. V'hu moken neshamas Yisrael, that's the soul of the source of the souls of Israel, the way mishrakim ba'ak, as they're rooted in Adam Kadmon. Or Moshe shehu shushbina demalka, and Moses, who's the shushbina, the translate shushbina. Shushbina is like the escorter. The two escorters from both sides. The escort of the king, there's Shushbina de Matronisa. The one that escorts the queen is the one who escorts the king. So Moses, escorter of the king, he generated, or he drew down and transmitted into the souls of Israel from their root and their source, the way they are in the essence of the divine energy light, the inner dimension of Ak. And look at what it says, Likkutei Torah on this pasuk. V'sham And there it says the Hamshachi l'masayim, and the pasuk in other words the masayim, and there it says the Hamshacha, the transmission, the masayim sheyuchlu lisalis mamata lamayla. So Metzayim is the way it's drawn down in them from Ak, is drawn into the souls, this power. And Masayim, their journey is the opposite, is how they elevate, that they should be able to elevate from the below upward, with the level of with all their might. And we can say that the power, this hidden power, for them to have this acceptance of the yoke of heaven that we spoke about, yesh be'etzem b'neshamis Yisrael, is fundamentally there in the souls of Israel. We could say this is an inheritance from our patriarchs, like the hidden love that has each one as an inheritance from our ancestors. And look what it says in Tanya chapter 18 and 19. And what Moshe drew down, who she has galus haratzon. What Moshe, so if that's the case, if we have it from our office, what else do we need? Okay? This is the explanation here. So that we have, what Moshe drew down, Hushiag is galus, that there should be a revelation of this desire. That should be the love that comes from the power of it being drawn down from their source. And from what it says in the beer in Likkutei Torah there, it's apparent, it seems, that this is the bittul of kabolat el shomayim. Okay, so we have this which comes from the makif, from Ak, that comes from Moshe, that's that. It should be the revealed. And Moshe draws down that it should be revealed. Okay, Kitzur. Also from the reflection of Ak, you have the power of giving our lives on sanctifying God. And also the level of hidden love. And through his free will, he brings it out to reveal. But in his mind and his heart. That's the level of the bride, the soul's expiration. And this comes from the inner dimension of Ak, and specifically the souls of Israel. It could also say that from there is also the power of the bittul, subjugation of the prefacing, we will do and then we will hear. That's the bittul to the source of the desire, the owner of the desire. That's accepting the yoke of heaven. Even though it's concealed, nevertheless, it's very intense, very powerful. And it also has joy in it, that you fulfill the desire of the higher desire. And also joy, pleasure, that is pleasure above. You have pleasure from God's pleasure. It's called accepting the yoke because it's complete commitment and giving over of yourself. Not based on rational or benefits. Not like a teacher and student or a giver and a recipient where there comes from knowing, from an awareness and kabolat from receiving something. And that's the Metzayim, they told all the stories of the narrative of all their travels. What's the narrative of the travels? The power that Moshe draws down from Ak, from the root of the souls, and then the power that they can climb upward and reveal it. So we finished chapter 61, pages 113 through 116.
Why is it that time
1 minute.
The fact